in the frozen forests of North America. Long before the arrival of European settlers, tribes whispered of a spirit darker than the night itself. They called it by many names, but one survived across centuries: the Wendigo. It was not just a monster of flesh, but a curse, a hunger that could never be satisfied. The elders said it was born from greed, from desperation, from the cold jaws of famine when the snow buried the world and families starved. In those winters, some gave in to the ultimate taboo, cannibalism, and when they tasted human flesh, their souls twisted, becoming something less than human, more than beast. The Wendigo was the punishment, a creature with bones pushing through skin, lips chewed away in hunger, eyes glowing like dying embers, taller than a man, faster than a wolf, hungrier than death itself. But what made the Wendigo feared most was not its appearance, it was its voice. Survivors whispered that it called your name, mimicking the voices of loved ones, luring you deeper into the snow until you vanished. This is not a European fairy tale. It is not a monster born of imagination alone.
Hi,
it is one of
everyone.
the oldest
Welcome
horror
back to
stories
my
of the
channel.
American wilderness.
Today we're having an
A story that has
adventure.
haunted tribes, travelers, and even modern men who dared to enter the endless forests. And tonight, we tell it in full. From its origins in the tribal heartlands, to chilling encounters in the colonial age, to strange sightings in modern times, the Wendigo has never died. Because hunger never dies. The story begins in the bitter silence of the North. Centuries ago, long before maps and borders carved the land into nations, the Algonquin people tell of a winter so cruel, so endless, that even the strongest hunters could no longer bring back food. The rivers froze, solid. The deer vanished. The trees groaned with ice. And in the heart of the storm, an entire village faced death. In that village, there was a man, some say a warrior, others say a father with children to feed. His name was lost, erased, perhaps on purpose, but his deed was remembered. His hunger gnawed at him, and as the cries of starving children pierced the night, he broke the one law that must never be broken. He ate the flesh of his own kind. The elders say that the moment he swallowed that cursed meat, something inside him twisted. His heart turned to ice. His soul tore apart. His hunger, instead of being quieted, grew sharper, fiercer, impossible to satisfy. He had fed on human flesh, and now he would never crave anything else. That night, the villagers heard a scream from his lodge, not of a man, but of something becoming less than human. When they rushed to see, they found claw marks carved into the frozen wood, footprints too large for any man, and a trail leading into the forest no one dared follow. From that night on, they spoke of him only in whispers. He was no longer man. He had become the first Wendigo, a monster with skin stretched too tight, bones ripping through, lips chewed away in hunger, and eyes glowing like dying fire. The forest changed too. Hunters said they felt watched. At night, the children heard a voice calling their names in the dark, familiar voices of fathers, mothers, friends. But when they ran outside, the snow swallowed them, and they were never seen again. The Wendigo was born of hunger, but it was more than that. It was a curse, a punishment for greed, for desperation, for crossing the forbidden line, and worse still, the curse was contagious. For the Algonquin believed that anyone who turned to cannibalism, anyone who broke the taboo of flesh, risked becoming one themselves. That winter passed. The tribe survived, but they carried a new fear, not only of starvation, not only of the snow, but of the shadow that hunger leaves behind. The Wendigo, the first of its kind, still roamed the forest, and it would never be full again. The story of that first Wendigo did not vanish with the snow. It spread like a shadow through the Algonquin tribes, whispered around fires, carried in hunting songs, and told two children as warnings. The forest was already a place of mystery, vast, endless, echoing with unseen life. But now it was something else. It was cursed. The Algonquin elders described the Wendigo not as just a creature of flesh, but also as a spirit, a presence that moved with the wind, slipping between trees like smoke. They said it lived inside the forest itself, waiting, always, waiting for hunger to return to men's hearts. The Wendigo was not bound to one body alone. It could be many. It could move from man to man, from soul to soul, carried like disease. To walk into the winter forest was to enter the Wendigo domain. The snow was its blanket. The trees were its bones. The icy wind was its breath. Hunters who strayed too far spoke of strange silence, as if the forest itself held its breath. Sometimes they found tracks in the snow, long, dragging footprints, stretched and distorted, as if made by something that had forgotten how to walk like a man. And then there was the hunger. The Algonquin believed that even hearing the Wendigo's name could plant a seed inside a person, a slow hunger that began to gnaw from within. They said a man could be perfectly full, with meat in his belly and warmth in his lodge. Yet he would wake with an ache, a craving he could not understand. That was the first sign of possession, the Wendigo spirit creeping into his heart. To protect themselves, the tribes created rituals. Fires were burned for many nights. Offerings of tobacco and animal bones were cast into the flames. Prayers whispered to the Great Spirit for protection. Shamans marked warriors with red paint, symbols of resistance against the curse. But even these protections sometimes failed, because the Wendigo was clever. It did not always rush upon its prey with claws and teeth. Sometimes it hid in the forest, its long body clinging to trees, waiting in silence. Sometimes it called in familiar voices, a brother, a wife, a child. The Algonquin said the Wendigo learned from every soul it devoured, stealing their voices, their memories, their laughter. So, when the people of the forest heard their names carried in the wind, they knew better than to answer, because the Wendigo was not just a beast. It was the hunger of the forest itself, and hunger always comes back. The Wendigo was not feared only for its hunger, nor for its monstrous body. What made it most terrifying was its voice. The Algonquin people said the Wendigo did not roar like a beast or growl like a wolf. Instead, it spoke in the voices of the dead. It spoke in the voices of the missing. And worst of all, it spoke in the voices of those you loved most. On winter nights, when the moonlight turned the snow silver and the trees creaked with ice, hunters would hear it. A call carried softly on the wind. Brother, come here. Father, help me. Child, don't leave me. The words were familiar, but something in them was wrong. Too stretched, too hollow, as if spoken through a mouth that no longer remembered how to be human. Children were the first to vanish, drawn outside by the voices of parents who were already asleep inside the lodge. Their tiny footprints led into the trees and ended abruptly, as if swallowed by the snow. Then, grown men disappeared, hunters who swore they heard their wives crying in the forest, warriors who chased the sound of brothers calling for help. They followed the voices deeper and deeper, until the village never saw them again. The survivors spoke of something else, something more terrifying than vanishing. A few who returned alive claimed they had seen the Wendigo with their own eyes. They described a towering shape between the trees, gaunt and skeletal, its eyes glowing like dying embers. And worse, its lips moved as it called their names, perfectly, almost tenderly. One man told of hiding behind a fallen tree as the Wendigo passed by. He swore it wore the face of his own mother, stretched across its skull like a mask, torn and shifting as it smiled. The tribe never doubted him, because they all knew the truth. The Wendigo carried the memories of those it devoured. Every voice, every face, every laugh, stolen and used to lure the living closer. The elders warned the people, when you hear your name in the night, do not answer. When you hear your loved ones calling from the forest, do not follow, because the Wendigo knows your heart, and it will use it against you. To this day, deep in the frozen forests, Travelers claimed to hear strange voices on the wind, voices that should not be there, voices that beg you to step off the path, to walk deeper, into the trees, and never return. When the first waves of Europeans arrived on the shores of the New World, they brought with them steel, muskets, and their own tales of witches and demons. But nothing in their Bibles or folklore could prepare them for the hunger that haunted the vast North American wilderness. The Algonquin tribes tried to warn them. Around fires, they told stories of the Wendigo, the cursed spirit of endless hunger. But the settlers, hardened by ocean voyages and unfamiliar with the land, dismissed these tales as superstition. To them, the real dangers were wolves, the bitter, cold, and rival colonies. Then the disappearances began. In remote outposts, men vanished from their cabins, leaving behind meals half-cooked, doors open to the snow. Hunting parties failed to return, though their tracks led clearly into the woods, and then stopped. Soldiers claimed to hear voices in the night, calling their names in accents that sounded like their wives back home in England or France. The Algonquin shook their heads. They had heard it before. In 1661, French missionaries recorded the first written account of what they called Wendigo psychosis. A man in the northern forests confessed to being consumed by a hunger for human flesh. He begged to be executed before he harmed anyone. The Jesuits noted, his eyes were wild, his body weak, yet he spoke of a voice in the forest that would not leave him. He was killed by his own people, who feared the curse would spread. But others were not so merciful. Settlers who turned to cannibalism during harsh winters, trapped, starving, desperate, began to whisper of shapes outside their cabins, shadows moving against the snow, voices that urged them to feed. Some claimed the Wendigo came to them in dreams, standing over their beds, waiting. One explorer wrote in his journal of seeing a gaunt figure, taller than any man, standing between the pines. Its ribs showed through its chest, and its breath was steam in the frozen night. It called to me in my brother's voice, though my brother was an ocean away. That page was the last in his diary. His body was never found. Over time, the settlers began to fear the stories they once dismissed. The Algonquin warnings no longer sounded like superstition. The Wendigo was not a tale told only to children. It was something that prowled outside the log walls, something the cold and hunger seemed to invite. And as more settlers vanished into the forests, one truth spread quietly among them. In this land, hunger had a face, and it was watching. The Wendigo was feared, but fear alone was not enough to protect the tribes. For generations, the Algonquin knew that the curse would return whenever hunger struck, and so they prepared not only to endure it, but to confront it. From this need rose the hunters of the Wendigo, shamans, warriors, and guardians who risked everything to fight the spirit of endless hunger. These hunters were not ordinary men. They underwent rituals meant to shield their souls from possession. Their faces were painted in crimson and black, symbols of fire and night. Some fasted for days, proving they could withstand hunger without giving in. Others carried charms carved from bone or painted stones, said to trap evil spirits. The shamans gave them chants, ancient words of power that echoed through the forests like a warning to whatever lurked there. When rumors spread of a Wendigo stalking a village, the hunters went into the woods together. They followed the signs. Strange tracks too long for human feet, claw marks in tree bark, snow melted where no fire had burned. The air grew colder as they drew near, and even the animals vanished, as if the forest itself refused to witness what would come next. Some stories tell of battles. Warriors claimed to see the Wendigo face to face, taller than the tallest man, its ribs tearing through its skin, its mouth filled with broken teeth. They loosed arrows tipped with bone, struck with spears, and shouted chants into the freezing night. When the creature fell, its body crumbled into snow and ice, leaving behind only a foul stench that lingered for days. Other stories were darker. Some hunters returned broken, their eyes hollow, whispering that they had heard the Wendigo voice inside their own minds. Others never returned at all. A few were said to have become Wendigos themselves, their strengths twisted in two, the very thing they had sworn to destroy. The shamans performed cleansing rituals for villages struck by the curse. Fires burned all night. Offerings of animal hearts and tobacco were cast into the flames. Songs were sung until dawn to remind the people that hunger was not their master. And yet, the fear never left, because the hunters could not kill what was not fully alive. For the Wendigo was not just a creature of bone and blood. It was the embodiment of hunger itself. You could fight it, wound it, even scatter its body to the winds, but as long as men hungered, the Wendigo would return. And so, the hunters fought not only a monster, but a shadow that would outlive them all. The Wendigo belongs to the past, or so some would like to believe. A relic of old fears, of long winters and starving villages. But the truth is darker. For even in the modern age, with highways and cities, electricity and warmth, the Wendigo's shadow lingers. In the early 20th century, doctors in Canada began documenting what they called Wendigo psychosis. Men, often isolated in remote camps, confessed to a craving for human flesh. Perfectly sane one day, trembling and ravenous the next, they begged to be restrained or even executed before the hunger consumed them. Some claimed they heard voices outside their cabins at night, calling in familiar tones. Some said they dreamed of tall figures standing at the edge of the trees, watching. There are darker stories too, in the forests of Ontario and Minnesota. Police reports tell of hunters who vanished without trace, their camps torn apart, food left uneaten. Search parties found footprints in the snow, deep, long, inhuman. The tracks ended suddenly, as though the figure had taken flight. One modern case from the 1980s describes a trucker who broke down on a remote road in northern Canada. He told police he heard someone calling his name in the night, though no one else was near. He walked into the tree line, following the voice, and claimed to have seen a gaunt shape with burning eyes. He fled back to his cab and refused to leave it until rescuers arrived. His story was dismissed, but the terror in his voice was not. Even today, hikers and campers speak of strange cries in the wilderness. Shadows too tall, too thin, glimpsed just beyond the firelight. Some laugh and call it imagination. Others don't return to laugh at all. But perhaps the most unsettling truth is this. The Wendigo was never only about monsters in the woods. It was about the hunger inside us all. Greed, consumption, the endless need for more food, land, wealth, power. The Algonquin told the story not just to frighten their children, but to remind their people that hunger without restraint would destroy them. And when we look at the modern world, where greed devours forests, where consumption never ends, where hunger is both physical and spiritual, the Wendigo feels less like a ghost story, and more like a mirror. The old one said, "The Wendigo is always waiting, not only in the frozen woods, but in the shadows of the human heart. Because as long as there is hunger, the Wendigo can never die." The story of the Wendigo is older than maps, older than nations, older than every road and city that now stretches across the continent. It was whispered in the darkness of the forest, carried in the crackle of firelight, told to warn, to frighten, and to teach. But what does it mean to us now? Some say the Wendigo is just a monster of myth, a gaunt figure wandering in the snow, a creature of fear to explain the unexplainable. But those who have lived in the shadow of hunger know better. The Wendigo is not only flesh, it is not only spirit. It is the name we give to greed that devours without end. In the old stories, a man became Wendigo when he betrayed his people, when hunger made him consume what should never be consumed. In the modern world, we may not fear starving winters in the same way, but the hunger is still here. We see it in the endless taking of the earth, the forests stripped bare, the rivers poisoned, the land consumed as though it were nothing but meat for our appetite. The Algonquin elders might say the Wendigo walks among us still, not in the form of a beast, but in the choices of mankind. And yet, there is something more chilling, because while greed can be an idea, the Wendigo has always been more than an idea. Too many vanishings, too many voices in the dark, too many sightings whispered by those who swore they were not dreaming. If the Wendigo is real, then it is not a story locked in the past. It is a presence, a shadow in the forest, a hunger, waiting for us when we are weakest. So the next time you walk alone in the woods and hear a voice calling softly behind you, will you answer? The next time hunger gnaws inside you, not just for food, but for more than you need, will you remember this story? The Wendigo is not gone. It is the hunger that waits. It is the greed that whispers. It is the shadow that follows every step we take when no one else is near. The Algonquin elders warned, never answer the voice in the dark. Never follow where it calls. And above all, never let your hunger control you. Because the Wendigo is listening, and once it knows your name, it will never forget it.